Round one of the fantasy playoffs is officially upon us. We're going to take a bird's eye view at week 15 rankings for fantasy football, diagnose some risers and fallers this week, why that may be the case, and whether you should be actively looking to play them this week, or if they should be actually taking a backseat on your bench in one of the most important weeks of fantasy football. We're going to alternate 5 risers, 5 fallers throughout the episode. And Cameron, let's just start on a positive note here. Let's start with riser Jauan Addison this week. We're taking a look at Fantasy Pros consensus rankings when we do so. In week 14, Jauan Addison was the wide receiver 33. Now in week 15, he has shot up to the wide receiver 27. I think we can look at this and diagnose this fairly easily. Last week, 8 receptions on 12 targets for 133 yards, and count them up, 1, 2, 3 touchdowns on the week. He does get the Chicago Bears in week 15, though, who have been a stingy defense all year. However, 8 for 162-1 just 2 weeks ago against the Chicago Bears. So I think the question we need to ask when we look at Jauan Addison as a riser, does lightning strike twice?
Yeah, I do think it does. And you look at the offense that he's in, it really benefits him immensely because Justin Jefferson has so many eyes on him all the time. We saw that in that first Bears matchup. Jefferson, I think, had 2 receptions in that game. The Bears focused on shutting him down, which just led to Jauan Addison big play after big play. And that's what he's getting in his 4 last games. His yards per reception have been 20, 20, 13, and 16. The Vikings are finding ways to hit him downfield. He's being used in the red zone. I think he's getting high efficiency targets, and I don't think that's going to go away. 8, 9, 6, and 12 in his last 4 games as well. I think this offense is starting to roll, and I think Jauan Addison has found his role within that.
Yeah, I think his role is so important here because when they drafted him just a few years ago, I mean, it was some people were like, no, we need to build out the offensive line. And I was very much in favor of getting Justin Jefferson a second weapon because what you're seeing now is defenses are forced to make a decision. Are you going to give up wide open yak to Justin Jefferson on crossing routes over the middle? Or are you going to allow Kevin O'Connell to just take deep shot after deep shot after deep shot to Jauan Addison in one-on-one coverage? And what you're seeing is Sam Darnold is willing to take deep shot upon deep shot here. And the Vikings, I believe they lead the league in EPA on deep ball attempts this year. So Kevin O'Connell is just cooking at this point with these 2 weapons. When you've got TJ Hawkinson as a safety blanket, you've got Justin Jefferson in the middle intermediate portion of the field, and you've got Jauan Addison on the sideline who, yeah, if you want to give up 40 yards over the top, great, we'll take that. It's either that or Justin Jefferson will beat you for 25 plus across the middle, which, as we saw this last week, he and Jauan Addison both got home for 130 plus yards. So the Chicago Bears defense is tough, but I'm going to be really curious to see which poison they pick this week, because if you want to limit Justin Jefferson, you can, but if they want to get beat for 162 by Jauan Addison like they did back in week 12, that's also probably going to be a recipe for another loss as well, as this game is now also in a US Bank Stadium. They were at Soldier Field prior to. So this will be a matchup I'm watching closely for this week. I think Jauan Addison, wide receiver, let's ask this follow-up question then. Is wide receiver 27 too low?
I think he's probably pushing that wide receiver 24 range. Just looking at who Fantasy Pros has around that. Wide receiver 22, Garrett Wilson, then Zay Flowers, DJ Moore, Brian Thomas, DK Metcalf, Jauan Addison. I think that's a solid tier. I think that we can even add wide receiver 21, Jerry Jeudy. I think that's the tier he's in. I think you could rank him up as high as 21, and I wouldn't bat an eye because we've seen 230-plus performances in this last 3 weeks, and one of them was against the team he's playing. Now he's at home in what is going to be great weather because it's in a dome. So it's like,
right.
It just feels like it's adding up for Jauan Addison. And yeah, I mean, the Bears right now allowing the 4th most yards per attempt in the NFL. So they're allowing you to stretch the field, which is what they do with Jauan Addison. So yeah, I think he's probably right on that wide receiver 24 cusp.
Yeah, and to be clear, this isn't just like Jauan Addison is getting 3 targets and capitalizing on 2 couple long bomb touchdowns. Yep. I mean, he's drawn 8+ targets now in 3 of the last 4 weeks, so he is getting involved in this Kevin O'Connell offense. Now we're seeing this dynamic finally play out of, yeah, if you want to take Justin Jefferson away, we'll continue to take deep shot upon deep shot because we have a wide receiver who can excel in that category. And we even saw that last year, right? Like Jordan Addison had 10 touchdowns last year too, and we saw him connect on deep balls. So we knew this was in the range of outcomes. We're now finally starting to see it come to fruition. Let's talk about a follow though. And I think this is one that maybe we should have been talking about a while ago, but this week especially, I was really surprised to see Marvin Harrison Jr., who last week against the Seattle Seahawks was ranked as the wide receiver 20. I know you got to buy Mageddon in there, so that kind of shakes things up a little bit. But he goes from the wide receiver 20 all the way down to the wide receiver 31 this week, despite a relatively good matchup with the New England Patriots. Now, I know what most people are going to say is you got Christian Gonzo locks there, right? He's going to lock up Marvin Harrison Jr., which, honestly, when I look at this ranking, I honestly can't say I disagree with that either, because it hasn't been great for Marv, right? He's the wide receiver 28 in expected fantasy points per game this year, the wide receiver 41 in fantasy points per game overall, though. So clearly there's a disconnect here, Cameron. Because if you are a top 30 wide receiver in expected fantasy points per game, but can't even give me top 40 production, something is wrong. So let's diagnose this. What's going on with Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Yeah, it just feels like him and Kyler aren't connecting. It really does feel like Kyler, who we will talk about later in this episode, just is not playing up to a standard that we've kind of seen from him throughout his career. It feels like Kyler's been struggling as of late, not moving the ball in the same way. And I think that's really kind of what it's come to, because like you said, he's seen 20 targets over his last 2 weeks. Yeah. So it's not like he's not getting opportunities. It's just they're not connecting, and they're not high value targets. We're not seeing him connect down the field. He's seen 60 and 49 yards in his last 2 games. So I think that's a really big part of it. And it is kind of worrisome that even though we're seeing the targets, we're just not seeing, the receptions and yards following.
Yeah. When you watch Marv's film, there's a lot of things that I think you would just think would be more polished coming into the league in terms of separation, in terms of his physicality, in terms of the way in which, the offense would even utilize him, right? There's so many different elements and facets to Marv's game that I think we just expected to be more pro ready than they are. And there's clearly a disconnect there. So I don't know if it's just going to take another offseason with Marv to get in sync with Kyler. I don't know if it's, here's what I'll say. I think Marv will be just fine in the league, but there is very clearly a disconnect right now. And there are very clearly things in Marv's game that need improvement, that need refinement right now. And when you look at a matchup with the New England Patriots, you want to think that's a good matchup, but Christian Gonzalez has been playing phenomenal ball this year. Is wide receiver 31 too harsh, though? Again, let's ask the follow-up question there. Is an 11-spot dip in the rankings too harsh?
It feels like it, but at the same time, who they have above him on Fantasy Pros. Jacoby Myers, that tier that I just listed. Khalil Shakir's ahead of him. Marv has not done anything for me to prove that, hey, I should be trusting him right now, that he is going to come through when I need him this week, when all those guys that I've listed have given me so much more on the field and just, get me excited about there's a ceiling there as well, right? I think Marv's got a low floor, and it just doesn't feel like he quite has the ceiling either. So I think it's kind of got that shock value of who you really have Marvin Harrison, a top 10 fantasy pick outside wide receiver, top wide receivers. It does, but I think it's justified at this point. I truly do.
I mean, again, when he's the wide receiver 28 in expected fantasy points per game, and his ranking now this week, and again, I don't know if you want to call it a neutral matchup with a Patriot secondary that can let up points to wide receivers, but just by drawing their best quarterback at Christian Gonzalez, maybe you want to call that a wash and say, yeah, you know what, wide receiver 31 to wide receiver 20 in expected fantasy points. Yeah, that's probably fair. You also look at the reality. He only has one game with more than 60 receiving yards in his last 10 contests. So that's not a guy, if you were to tell me Marv's going to give me 54 on 5 receptions this week, I would probably tell you, yeah, that's going to be somewhere between the wide receiver 27 and the wide receiver 35 this week, which is pretty much smack dab in the middle of where Marv is ranked. So I unfortunately, I think it's warranted. Again, we'll touch on Kyler Murray more later in this episode. I don't want to push the cart ahead of the horse here. But if you do enjoy our content here on YouTube, before we get to that later in the episode, Make sure you subscribe and turn on those notifications as well. We know a lot of you out there consume our content, and some of you may not even realize that you aren't subscribed yet. You're like, yeah, I tune in every week. I see it on my sidebar on YouTube, and I click on the video when it comes up. You might not even realize you're not subscribed. So we would appreciate it if you take a moment to do so. Hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell as well. We'll be adjusting our content schedule here coming up, so stay tuned for that. But we are still bringing you fantasy football content through the regular season, through your championship, and all the way through the offseason as well. If you're a dynasty player, we're going to have some dynasty content for you all, and NFL draft content for you all as well. So make sure you're subscribed. Tune in for all of that new content coming up. Let's talk about another rising wide receiver now, Cameron. How about Davante Adams of the New York Jets? Was ranked as the wide receiver 23 going into last week by Fantasy Pros, is now the wide receiver 16 and draws the Jacksonville Jaguars, which, frankly, that's all I should really need to say to maybe warrant this rise in the ranking. We know how atrocious this Jaguar secondary is. How much more do you want to say about Davante Adams here? I think it's noteworthy that he's still being ranked ahead of Garrett Wilson, despite, I mean, you look at these two guys' box scores, they're like identical week to week. It's 10 or 11 targets. It's 6 or 7 receptions for 90 to 110 yards. It's like two peas in the same pod here. But clearly, the experts over at Fantasy Pros, they are pushing Davante Adams ahead of Garrett Wilson. Do you agree with that?
I think I do. And I'm going to be honest, I'm in a tough spot this week. So Lucas and I are facing off in our dynasty playoffs.
Burying the lead on that one. Yeah, we haven't even mentioned that at all in this episode.
We got two juggernaut teams when they show up, right? I mean, we got, like Lucas has listed off his wide receivers before. My team, my wide receivers.
In case people are new here? No, I'm kidding.
You can, but my running backs were strong to start the season and have since, given up on me. But I'm in the spot where I'm considering Jerry Jeudy, Davante Adams, or DJ Moore, right? I throw DJ Moore in there because he did score 23 last time against the Vikings. And I got to say, Davante Adams is very tempting because of the volume that you just listed. Yeah. And he has been scoring touchdowns these last 2 weeks. That's kind of what gets me a little bit more excited about Davante than Garrett Wilson. I think at this point in the season, Aaron Rodgers is just, I want to put up stats. I want people to look at this and not go, oh my gosh, he only had 2,800 yards or something. I think he wants people
to blemish in his career, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think he wants people to look at it and go, okay, he was still a competent quarterback, right? He might have fell off a little bit, but they're going to forget the media later on. 100%, because he knows most people are going to be box score hunting, 10 years down the road.
Right.
And so I think he's going to trust Davante Adams when he does it. So I think it's warranted. I think, on the flip side, I think Garrett Wilson being at wide receiver 22 is probably a little low.
Right.
I think the fact that he's below like a Calvin Ridley, even Ladd McConkey and Jerry Jeudy, I think that's a little low for me. So I think they should be closer, but I think where Davante Adams is warranted based on the volume that both are getting.
Yeah, and to quantify that volume as well, and what that's produced, 21.8 fantasy points per game the last 2 weeks. That's been the wide receiver 8 during that stretch. That's on 20.3 expected fantasy points per game, which is also the wide receiver 8. So Davante has been delivering, on the top 10 capital you spent on him earlier this year, despite it, coming late in the season. Mm-hmm. He's been the wide receiver 11 in expected fantasy points per game since being traded to the Jets too. The volume is there. Each week it's expected that he's going to give you, that 15 plus point week. We're starting to see that happen now. You get a matchup with the Jaguars. I think it warrants an uptick in the rankings this week. Yeah, but I think the Garrett Wilson point you bring up is valid. Should there be a 6 wide receiver gap between these two guys? I don't think if you rank Garrett Wilson wide receiver 19 and Davante Adams wide receiver 16, I think that's perfectly valid. I don't know if I'd put 6 wide receivers between these two guys though. Let's talk about another faller now. Unfortunately, this one is fascinating to me because it's Alvin Kamara, who went into last week as the running back 2 in Fantasy Pros consensus rankings, is now the wide receiver 10 this week against the Washington Commanders. Box score from last week for Alvin Kamara, 17 attempts, 44 yards, caught all 5 of his targets for 35 yards as well. I think the killer thing here is that you did see Kendre Miller get more factored in, right? 26% of the snaps, stole a goal line touchdown from Alvin Kamara as well. Is that what's being factored in here against Washington? Because Washington's been, I'll say, better as of late. I'm not going to call them good. I think you can still put up points at the running back position against them. But how much of this is the matchup? How much of this is Kendre Miller? What's the balance here? How do we balance and rationalize this?
Yeah, I don't think the matchup as much, but I think it's the addition of Kendre Miller, right? Because he moved up to running back 2, thinking no more Taysom Hill. We're finally going to see Alvin Kamara unleashed. We're going to, he's going to get tons of goal line opportunities. But then I think it's the fact that Jake Hayner is going to be playing quarterback as well. Derek Carr is going to miss a couple of weeks with that non-throwing hand injury. So I think it's the mix of, is this team even going to move the ball? Only putting up 14 points last week on the Giants, when they couldn't move the ball at all either. And so I think it's just a mix of both of those, right? I think he's still a top 10 running back. I think that's where Fantasy Pro still has him ranked. It's just, okay, if he does lose, goal line carry or red zone carry or 2 to Kendre Miller and misses out on a touchdown, you're going to be a little more disappointed like you were last week, where he's still giving you 12 fantasy points, but if he gets that touchdown right, it's 18. He's in that talk of, top five running back in the week. So I think it's just a mix of both of those, of how often is he going to find the red zone? And then if they're actually there, are they going to use him or Kendre Miller?
Yeah, I mean, when we saw Spencer Rattler play in week 6 through 8 here when he was in for Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, 17.4 fantasy points, the running back 17 in week 6, 8.4 against Denver, the running back 32. He did put up a fine game against the Chargers, 18.2 for the running back 13. So, yeah, I don't know if we can necessarily expect top 10 numbers from Kamara. I do think the running back 10 is warranted, though. I think people would look at that and say, well, what do you mean? It's against Washington. It's a fine defense. But I 100% agree. I mean, when your best pass catcher right now outside of Alvin Kamara is, I don't know, is it Jauan Johnson or Marquez Valdes-Scantling?
Yeah,
I mean, you want to have a debate around that one?
Exactly.
Who's Jake Hayner going to be throwing the football to?
Yeah.
The ghost of Dante Pettis that sneaks in? This offense might not move the ball, especially when the Washington Commanders secondary has been playing better as well. So, yeah, I think this is totally valid. Why would you not just shut down the run game and let Jake Hayner try and beat you through the air when this offense probably will be unable to move the ball without 3 of their top 4 threats on offense, and the 4th one being Alvin Kamara, who's healthy and we're talking about. So I'm with you on that one. I think this warrants a dip in the rankings. So people really shouldn't be surprised when they see, oh my gosh, he's down 8 spots in rankings. Yeah, he is this week. And is running back 10 too generous still?
I don't know. It's hard because we talk about it all the time. There's a lot of good running backs in here. And, the fact we're thinking about putting Kyron ahead,
right.
Like he's in that same range as him. I guess half PPR Kyron's ahead of Kamara, but you do look who's behind him: Tony Pollard, James Conner, Charbonnet, with the assumption Kenneth Walker doesn't play, Jonathan Taylor. So I think he still probably warrants that spot. But is it going to be shocking if he's the running back 18 again on this week? Absolutely not. So I think that's just what it is the range of outcomes are so much bigger now, right? Where he could still go off, right? It's still Alvin Kamara. We've seen it before, but the floor is much lower than it has been.
Yeah, could he easily just give you 6-7 receptions in this game? I mean, 5-6 receptions in those 3 games with Spencer Rattler as well. It's possible, he PPR scams his way to a top 12 finish, but I also do think that would probably need to come on the back of 7+ receptions and not just 5 like he had this last week. So, yeah, Alvin Kamara is a faller this week, unfortunately, but may be warranted. Let's talk about another riser here now, Cameron. We're going to go back to the wide receiver position. How about Jauan Jennings? Have yourself a day, young man. 7 receptions on 8 targets for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns against a stingy Chicago Bears secondary this last week. That bumps him from the wide receiver 25 in week 14 rankings all the way up to the wide receiver 18 now. Gets the Rams this week, who just got into quite the shootout with the Buffalo Bills this last week. Where are you at on Jauan Jennings? It feels like he has this big game and he cools off for a couple of games. Then he has this other big game again and everybody's back in and excited. I'll say this. I love the film on Jauan Jennings. I think he's a lot better than people are willing to give him credit for. But where are you at? Is this rise in the rankings warranted, despite, again, a Chicago Bears defense that has given up the second fewest fantasy points per game to wideouts this year?
Los Angeles Rams defense, you mean?
Oh, yeah, sorry, excuse me. Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
sorry.
No,
I was
you're
thinking
good.
about Chicago Bears, who we just torched.
Yep. And I do think at this point he is the wide receiver one in this offense. Like I don't even think it's disputable. He has out targeted Debo in every matchup except for one since Ayuk went out, and they've both been healthy, obviously. And it's his fourth game this year with 7 receptions and 90 yards. And then he's got a good matchup. So I think that's where it kind of comes down to is 49ers need to win this game. They just rolled over the Bears. The Rams are hot at the same time. So you're assuming this is going to be a shootout. Rams are allowing 8th most receiving yards, 8th most touchdowns on the year. It's just, I just get worried that, like you said, we've seen the floor of in half PPR, 6.5, 7.1 points per game in those last two of that is the floor. Obviously, Purdy being hurt, Purdy being out, that does affect it. And so I do think that, that's why he's a little bit higher. But, we talked about Garrett Wilson. I think I still trust Garrett Wilson a little bit more.
Yep.
I think it's just a little high. I still think he's a top 24 wide receiver. I think it's just nitpicking at that point of you're probably starting him if you got him because he is going to be, in that wide receiver 2 range. I just think he's probably closer to a lower end wide receiver 2 than a higher end wide receiver 2.
I don't want to get reckless and just think about how automatically just predict how this game will go and get stuck in that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
When you come off of a 86-point game, total points scored in that game with the Buffalo Bills, is there a world where the Rams just come into this game completely flat? I know it's a divisional matchup, but when you go toe-to-toe with superhuman Josh Allen, you come out on top. Is there a world where the Rams just come out flat in this game and actually I know they're on Tim Patrick Jr. and Izzy Abanikanda at this point, and Keyshawn Vaughn. Is there a world where Jauan Jennings doesn't need to have a 6+ target game and catch 5 of them for multiple scores? I'm just wondering how this game could play out because it's no question that the Rams are a good matchup here. They're 5th in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to wideouts over the last 5 weeks, allowing 6.8 more points above the average. So clearly you're Jauan Jennings is a fine play this week. I would say fire up Jauan Jennings as a borderline wide receiver 2, if not a wide receiver 2 this week.
Mm-hmm.
I also wonder if there's a world where somehow the 49ers just come out and roll the Rams and look flat because the Rams just look flat.
Yeah. I do think it's a little less of a chance than most teams I would give just because they are coached by Sean McVay, ran by, Matt Stafford's running that offense. But I do think, that is something we see quite a bit as teams have that high energy game and then a letdown the next one. And so I do think there's definitely a world that happens. I think it gets dangerous in this game to just predict it's going to be a shootout no matter what. Totally. Right. And I think that's what so many people are going to do.
That's what I'm trying to avoid here.
Yes,
I think
100%.
So many people are going to look at this game and say, look at what Puka Nacua just did. Look at what we got prime Matt Stafford back.
Yep.
We got Jauan Jennings and Brock Purdy who are perfectly in. You got Debo who's the squeaky wheel. Is he going to get the grease this week? I think so many people are just going to look at this game and think, this is a 55+ point shootout for sure. I think there's a good chance it could be, but this is one where I'm I want to push the brakes on that as much as possible. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's where I was trying to get with this is
100%.
I don't think it's a guarantee.
Yes. And like you said, it's not a guarantee. It definitely could still happen. They could both come out. It could be at one of the games of the year, in a division rivalry. But that's why I think we're both closer to that wide receiver 24 rank for him. Why we feel like maybe last week's more warranted still, even after the good game, even after Brock Purdy showing he's fine, just because there's more of range of outcomes that we see for Jauan Jennings than just this is going to be a big game where he's going to put up points no matter what. Yeah.
I'm comfortable slotting him in as a flex play this week. That is not to say you should be off of Jauan Jennings. I think you should be in on Jauan Jennings. I think the rise in his ranking is warranted.
Yeah.
But I don't think
don't get crazy.
Right. Let's not get too crazy here with Jauan Jennings. Again, I love the film on Jauan Jennings. He's been phenomenal all year long, but he's not one where I'm just ready to push him to top 15 status here against the Rams automatically. So let's take a quick break here, Cameron. We'll be back with 5 more risers and fallers afterwards. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We've discussed the likes of Jordan Addison, Marvin Harrison Jr., Davante Adams, Alvin Kamara, and Jauan Jennings. Let's unfortunately move on to another faller here, Cameron. We talked about him earlier in the episode. It's Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. Went into last week against the Seattle Seahawks as the quarterback 5. Now finds himself as the quarterback 11 in Week 15 rankings. He went 25 of 38 for 259 and 2 last week, threw 2 interceptions on top of it, 3 rushing attempts for 16 yards as well. We talked about the New England Patriots. They're a fine matchup. They're a matchup that can be exploited. Honestly, I'm not going to be surprised when James Conner gets 22 touches in this game and rumbles for 120 plus yards and finds the end zone as well. That's how I see this game playing out. I think Drew Petzing comes out and just establishes the run early and gets Trey McBride involved. That's how I see this playing out. So I understand the dip in rankings for Kyler Murray, but it does feel like Kyler's been disappointing from a fantasy perspective. We were a collective here, and Ty's not here to potentially take himself out of that, but as a collective, we were all big fans of Kyler Murray at value in fantasy drafts this year, and unfortunately, he's just kind of returning value. He's not taking this top 5 leap like we were potentially anticipating he could. So what's going on with Kyler Murray here? Why are we still ranking him inside of the top 12 even when he's been disappointing recently? And why were we ranking him as a top 5 option? Like, let's play a little compare and contrast here. What's changed?
Yeah, I think from a passing perspective, he's actually playing about where we projected him at. Yes, because you're projecting him to be like a 35 to 3,900 yard guy, 22 to 28 touchdowns. The issue is he's just not running the ball nearly as much. He came back at the last half of the year, played only 8 games, had 44 attempts. So far through 13 games this year, he's only at 58. And he's had 6 games with less than 5 rush attempts. That was just something we didn't see coming from Kyler Murray. We assumed that he was going to be one of these upper echelon rushers, that there was, he was going to be in the Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson tier of rush attempts, and he just hasn't. And I think that's what's holding him back. He's been very efficient. He's averaging 7.7 yards per carry. So when he is running, it's going well. It's just when he has these multiple games where he's only rushing the ball 2 times and he's not finding the end zone, that's what's hurting. So the floor that we expected to have from Kyler Murray every single week, we're not seeing. And I think that's the biggest difference between this year and what we've seen in years past.
There's this hilarious pattern that Kyler Murray is putting up right now. I'm sorry, I just need to point this out. If we had an editor who could go back and just put this on the screen for me, I would totally have him do that. We're currently on a pattern right now. Let me just read you this. Kyler Murray in week 1, quarterback 15, quarterback 1 overall in week 2, then goes 2 weeks outside of the top 15 quarterbacks, quarterback 5 finish in week 5, quarterback 25 finish in week 6, quarterback 5 finish in week 7. And here we go, quarterback 12, quarterback 30, and quarterback 4, quarterback 23, quarterback 17, quarterback 10. So we're alternating. You get 2 bad games from Kyler Murray, and then you get a great game from Kyler Murray, right? Mm-hmm. We're going on this funny stretch, and that's just something where it's like that's not a pattern that you can just copy paste and say it automatically applies. But it just goes to show where it's like you get these like 2 weeks of Kyler Murray where you're like, really? Like, man, that's disappointing. And then he gives you games like, oh yeah, that's right. That's why I was starting you. And he gives you another 2 games where you're like, man, really? And then he gives you another game. It's like, yes, that's why I'm starting you, right? It's this pattern that we're seeing over and over again. But yeah, when he's had 25 or when he's had less than 25 rushing yards in 6 of his last 8 games as well, he's not giving you that rushing production that you really do need for him to hit that upper echelon like we've been talking about here. I mean, 37, 45, 38 pass attempts in his last 3 games. So he's slinging it, man, because he had only given you one game with more than 34 pass attempts up before the bye week. So this Cardinals offense is throwing the ball more. We're just not seeing the fruit from Kyler Murray. And it's mostly because we're not getting the rushing production on the ground. And he's not this true pocket passer. Like, we can see a Matthew Stafford succeed, a Jordan Love gunslinger succeed, those kind of guys, a Jameis Winston, right? We see them succeed because they're slinging the ball around the yard, racking up yardage, throwing multiple touchdowns per game. We need Kyler to give us that rushing upside, and he's just not giving that to us.
Yeah, and I do think that his ranking's a little low. I think having Goff, even Purdy, I understand the matchup. I think I still have him ahead of him. It's just for him, he has 20 points if he finds the end zone twice, either through the air or on the ground. If he's found the end zone twice in a game, he scores 20 points. I think against New England, he's got a pretty good shot to do that. And so that's why I think his ranking should be a little bit higher, but I do think it has to be lower than where we've been ranking him all year long.
Yeah, I mean, we've been ranking him consistently in that quarterback 6 to 7 range pretty much the entire year. And I do think, like, when you got a Joe Burrow who's as red hot as he is right now, and he's got to be ahead of Kyler at this point. And then, you play the matchups. Do you like Brock Purdy against the Rams to outperform Kyler this week? Do you like Jared Goff to outperform Kyler this week? Those are 2 guys I think I'd be open to having a conversation about. But I also don't blame experts around the industry saying, like, hey, you know what? Kyler's got one great week and he always kind of falls off the next week. I'm going to cool off on him a little bit in a matchup against the Patriots, excuse me. However, a riser on the other side at the quarterback position, though, how about Tua Tagovailoa? Kyler Murray's dipping down to the quarterback 11. That's where Tua was ranked last week in Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. He's now all the way up at the quarterback 6, getting the Houston Texans this week. And that should be about all I need to tell you in this matchup, too. Yeah. Because this is one where, here, let's play a game. Do you think the Miami Dolphins and Texans game is going to be more of a shootout, or the Rams and 49ers? Which one has a higher chance of being a shootout?
Probably Miami, Houston, with Houston coming off the bye would be my guess. Just with the way Miami's been on a roll. But I could see, obviously you could see both, but I'd probably lean Miami, Houston.
Yeah, I mean, Tua has been slinging it around the yard for 285 plus and 2 touchdowns in 4 straight games now. I mean, he's been red hot. Ty pointed this out. I'll give Ty his props here. He was his start of the week last week, and he pointed it out in his episode. He has just been nasty good over the last 4 weeks here. Are you pushing Tua up into that top 7 range this week? Are you comfortable doing that?
I think so, and I don't usually want to push up quarterbacks who don't have the rushing upside.
Right.
But
the gunslingers, like we're just talking about. Yes. Yeah.
But that stat you just listed of 285 and 2 in 4 straight games plus 303 of those 4 straight, 3 of those games, it's hard not to bet on him in a game that they have to win. Yeah. Right. The Dolphins are definitely on the outside looking in of the playoffs, and they can't afford to lose. Yeah. A loss at any point for the rest of the year is pretty much, a nail in the coffin for them. And so I'm going to bank on them to continue rolling from an offensive perspective to, look to try to get a win, put up, a great fight against Houston, who's coming off a bye. I don't really see a reason that he's not going to keep this streak up. So for sure, betting on the hot hand of Tua this week.
I mean, he's been playing phenomenal ball, 75% completion percentage on 169 attempts over the last 4 weeks. I mean, that's just not so stupid stuff right there. So yeah, Tua's been balling out recently. I do think it's warranted that we see a top 7 rise in the rankings here. And again, if the Miami Dolphins are going to hang with the Houston Texans, I'll tell you what, the Houston Texans are much more exploitable on the perimeter than in between the tackles. They are allowing some of the fewest fantasy points in the run game this year, and they've just been getting lit up on the secondary in their secondary recently, excuse me. So yeah, you're going to see Mike McDaniel attack this secondary with Johnny over in the middle. You're going to see him attack it with Tyreek crossing routes over the middle. I do think we see Jalen Waddle get a bit more involved in this game too. I'm not expecting a massive game from Jalen Waddle, but I think he's a flex worthy piece this week. So I think that this could be a super fun game this week. and one where, I think if the Miami Dolphins are going to win the game, it's going to have to come. It's going to have to come through the air, through this Houston Texans secondary that can just be exploited. So, I think Tua is definitely a top 7 piece you can look at this week, which is just crazy. You just ride that hot hand until it flames out.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about another faller here. A darling this year, I'll call him, because Tyrone Tracy has been a lot of fun this year, but he goes from the running back 16 to the running back 24 in consensus ranks this week. He was, disappointing feels a little bit harsh.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the box score. The box score stats aren't that shiny. I'll say it like that. 16 attempts for only 45 yards last week, only 2.8 yards per carry. But he did find the end zone. His day was salvaged on 5 receptions on 10 targets for 38 yards. Now, I think the big reason why people are going to tank him in the rankings this week is because they see the Baltimore Ravens. They say, oh, crap, I don't want to play Tyrone Tracy against the Baltimore Ravens. Admittedly, I already took Tyrone Tracy out of one of my lineups because I saw that he was playing the Baltimore Ravens. I need to do a little bit more chewing on that, but that's what people are looking at. That's what people see when they're looking at Tyrone Tracy in their fantasy lineups this week. He hasn't had more than 45 rushing yards in each of his last 3 games. And this Ravens defense is just stingy in the run game. So, but man, and especially in PPR, half PPR leagues even, is an 8-spot dip warranted just because he plays the Baltimore Ravens?
Probably, because you see the 10 targets and you go, well, they're probably going to use, they've been using him in the past game. And I know it was Drew Lock this week, but I had 1 game over 4 targets the entire, rest of the season. So this isn't something we've been seeing a lot of from him. This is the anomaly. And Baltimore is allowing the lowest yards per carry, lowest yards per game, and lowest amount of runs over 5 yards this season. So they're just stopping everybody. It's been them and the Vikings kind of going back and forth between who's been the best run defense this week. And it just happens on the season to be Baltimore. So I just don't like that. I could see, John Harbaugh really getting this team going to just walk all over this Giants team, and it's just being a disgusting game. So yeah, you'd really have to bank on seeing another game like this in the receiving game from him to have any relevance. And the day also, salvaged by a touchdown. I don't think he finds the end zone in a game against the Ravens.
Spread is 15 points in this game in favor of the Ravens. Yeah. I mean, well, it's not working with Drew Lock at quarterback. I don't want to oversimplify this. John Harbaugh can just say, stop the run. Go ahead. Make Drew Lock beat us. But clearly, this is a New York Giants team that this game in Baltimore too. Oh gosh, it is, isn't it? That makes it even worse. Yeah, if the Giants have to go on the road to visit the Ravens, is Tyrone Tracy still running back 2?
Yep.
Let's ask that question. Is he still running back 2? I mean, because running back 4, he's 1 spot away from being a flex play in 12-man leagues. Is he still running back 2 this week?
Oh, I'd rather.
I mean, just
not.
Looking at the spread, looking at what Vegas thinks about this game, looking at the, everything tells you that this is a dud from Tyrone Tracy this week.
Yeah, I would really, really try and find a different avenue. Yeah, he's ranked right next to DeAndre Swift in this one, and I think that's. I think I'd take Swift over Tyrone Tracy, but Swift's playing Minnesota, who, like we said, it's Baltimore and Minnesota's best 2 run defenses.
Right.
But if I'm going to pick who's going to put up points, I'm going to pick Chicago to put up points, and hopefully Swift falls in the end zone over Tyrone Tracy and the Drew Lock against Baltimore in Baltimore. Or no, is it in MetLife?
I thought it was in Baltimore, but let me check. Man, if that's 15 points on the road.
I think it's 15 on the road.
Oh my gosh.
That's wild.
It is in MetLife. Oh my gosh. That's you at least give the home team a field goal, man.
Ooh, brutal.
That's rough.
Brutal.
So I want to take a few other names around Tyrone Tracy. Sincere McCormick. Did you play him against Atlanta over Tyrone Tracy?
Wow. That is a gross
Isn't that a
conversation.
gross question?
Because we were talking on our waiver wire episode yesterday, and I was like, I'd pick him up, but I
Yeah,
don't know if
I
I'd
think you
start
should.
him this week, right? Because you want to see what it looks
Yeah,
like. Zamir White did just go on IR for the rest of the season, so
he
that,
did.
that does help.
Yeah.
But still have an L. I honestly think I might go Sincere McCormick. I really do over Tyrone Tracy.
Play Gus Edwards against the Bucks.
God. I don't know. Wow, we're getting gross. I think I'm still gonna go Tracy. Right. Gus Edwards
Yeah.
found the end zone last week. He had, it's been really gross from him. I still think, but I think that's close. And that's to show you how far down the rankings Tyrone Tracy has tumbled this week because of the
Well,
matchup against Baltimore.
one more. You got Isaiah Davis or Braylon Allen against Jacksonville or Tyrone Tracy.
I'm gonna go Tracy because I know for sure there's gonna be volume.
Yeah,
That's what
I'll take this. I'll take the certainty on that one
Yep.
as well. But
Yep.
but again, like that's the range
Yeah.
we're looking at for Tyrone Tracy this week. So if you got other options, it would not hurt to look elsewhere if you're slotting in a Tyrone Tracy at the flex this week. If you are looking to make that decision on Tyrone Tracy, like I am in my dynasty league, right? I'm like, again, I'm going against Cameron. I got to figure out if I want to put in Tyrone Tracy or not because I need this win this week. You can join our Discord. We got a community over there that's waiting to help you out with all sorts of questions. I mean, literally, I go check our channels daily, and it is flooded with polls, waiting for people to give their input. So if you just want a simple, mindless, like yes, no, like want your opinion to be heard without getting in debates with anybody, our Discord is one of the best places to do that. So you can find that down in the description of the audio podcast or YouTube video you are watching. We'd love to have you join the community we're building over there. Let's talk about our last risers and fallers here, Cameron, starting with old man Adam Thielen. He keeps getting it done. He's rising up the rankings this week, going from the wide receiver 41 against the Eagles last week, which I will say is what, in my opinion, was warranted for how good the Eagles secondary has been playing. Now finds himself as the wide receiver 33 this week against the Dallas Cowboys. I can't believe I'm saying this. This feels too low against the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, he has given you finishes of the wide receiver 6 and the wide receiver 17 since fully returning to the lineup. We saw him on a snap count in his first week back off IR. But now that he is back and fully integrated, wide receiver 6 and wide receiver 17. I feel like this is still too low. I feel like we should be talking about Adam Thielen as a borderline top 25 guy.
Yeah, I would agree. I had him as my hidden gem in our episode last week. And on there I had said, as long as he can survive Philly, you have Dallas, Arizona, Tampa the next 3 weeks.
Oh,
3 very exploitable matchups for Adam Thielen. And with the way, Dallas didn't exactly slow down. Obviously, he's not Jamar Chase.
No,
he's not Jamar Chase. I'm not saying that. But Jamar Chase did make them look like a JV squad, right? So I just think that Adam Thielen's definitely got an opportunity, especially at home, with Bryce Young playing better than he has been.
Oh, Bryce Young has been playing good ball. Yeah.
Yes, to just continue this. And if he's seeing double-digit targets and he's catching 80% of them, 10 to 11 yards down the field, I think we see a floor of what we saw last game, 15 half PPR fantasy points. You throw in a touchdown, he's a 20-point guy. I think that's kind of what we're looking at for the rest of the season with these next 3 matchups for Adam Thielen. So, yeah, I think he should probably be in that top 25 conversation as well.
Yeah, he's the wide receiver 12 in expected fantasy points per game over the last 2 weeks, and he's given you 21.6 points per game in PPR formats. I mean, he has been nothing short of phenomenal. And I do think this is somewhat of a testament to, yes, how good Adam Thielen has still been. I also think this is a testament to how well Bryce Young has been playing recently too. I mean, I'm not gonna sit out here and tell you, Bryce Young has automatically just become a top 15 quarterback in the league. I'm not gonna go that far. But when you see how he's looking to navigate the pocket, how he's looking to extend plays by maneuvering outside of the pocket as well, looking for Adam Thielen. I mean, the target shares are ridiculous for Adam Thielen too. He's looking for Adam Thielen because he is reliable. Xavier Legette, it's unfortunate. He had a chance for his big moment there at the end of the game against the Eagles to pull off probably the upset of the year. And goes right through his hands as he's fallen to the ground. That's just so tough on a quarterback like Bryce Young. Was like, dude, I'm doing whatever I can to ball out here to keep us in this game. So why would he not keep going back to Thielen in a matchup against the Dallas Cowboys, who we've seen their secondary get exploited on more than one occasion this year? I mean, if this team's going to keep playing good ball through Bryce Young, it's only going to be to Adam Thielen's benefit. So yeah, I can't believe I'm saying wide receiver 33 is too low. But again, let's look at some of the names here. How high would you go with Adam Thielen? Would you put him ahead of Marv this week? I mean, Marv's at the wide receiver 31. Would you put him ahead of Marv?
Yes, definitely.
I
don't think it's a question at this point.
I don't think it is either. I can't believe I'm saying that. It feels gross to say. Khalil Shakir coming off a fairly solid game as well. I will say a unique game for Khalil Shakir. A lot of chunk plays for Khalil Shakir last game. Not as much dink and dunk, underneath manufactured touch kind of stuff. You put Adam Thielen ahead of Khalil Shakir?
I think I would. I think Shakir's going to be used a lot against Detroit, but the way Adam Thielen's been going, I would start him up over Shakir.
Jordan Addison?
I think I still start Addison with how high that ceiling's been for him. But
yeah,
I think that's the tier he's in.
Right. I mean, we go one more, Jacoby Myers. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about clones of the same player, basically, except Adam Thielen has actually been the better receiver. Jacoby Myers has been fine. He's been getting the volume, but it hasn't amounted to much of anything.
No.
Adam Thielen's at least been giving you 99 plus yards the last 2 weeks. Jacoby Myers is sitting in that 50 to 70 yard land.
Yeah, and I mean, who's the quarterback in Vegas right now, too? Right? I mean, with
probably gonna end up being Desmond Ridder. Yeah.
So it's just, I'm gonna trust the pair that's been rolling. If you're talking about two bad teams, and two pretty decent matchups this week.
Jalen Waddle. Would you go that far?
I don't think I could. Waddle's been playing better, and Tua's been playing good.
I know.
But man, it could be that. It feels like it at the same time might be the wrong decision to go Waddle with how well Thielen's been playing over the last 2 weeks. But I think I still go Waddle.
And this is the last name we're going to end on. I am shocked that this player is this high. Did I have a miss? No, apparently not. Apparently rankings must have updated by the time I updated our doc here, because Jayden Reed is currently the wide receiver 27 in Fantasy Pros Consensus half PPR rankings this week. I would be playing Adam Thielen over Jayden Reed. That is a no-brainer for me.
Just dropped a goose egg.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're looking at Jayden Reed, wide receiver 27. He is our final follower, by the way. And if you're looking at Adam Thielen as a wide receiver 33, that seems like a massive mistake. Because Jayden Reed has been, it hasn't been good, man. Again, he gave you a goose egg, 1 target last week, but he's been the wide receiver 41 or worse in 4 of his last 6 games here. And can I just go ahead and spit out the stats that just made my jaw drop before we popped on here?
We'll love it.
I could, I'll let you take it from there. Because since week 7, Jayden Reed has been the wide receiver 80 in expected fantasy points per game, like not even close to rosterable. Now, you say, well, Lucas, he's only a part-time player, so when you boil in the efficiency metrics, the routes run, the targets, and everything, right? Whatever goes into the volume-based metrics. Of course, he's not on the field as much. He's not putting as much quantifiable data up there. Okay, great. Well, let's look at it on a fantasy points per route run basis then, if we want to go off of that metric. How about the wide receiver 95 since week 7 in expected fantasy points per route run? Not great, Bob. Not great. This is warranted. Especially against the Seattle Seahawks. They've been playing better on defense recently. I think they can still be exploited in their secondary, but honestly, I don't know if it's going to come by Jayden Reed for the Green Bay Packers. Yeah,
I mean, since week 7, like you're saying, 1 game over 3 receptions, 2 games over 30 yards, 2 games over 30 receiving yards for Jayden Reed. Gets bailed out in week 13 with 2 touchdowns on 3 catches. In week 11 against Chicago, it was kind of salvaged by 1 touchdown on 2 catches. It's been abysmal. And, since the bye, he's playing 57, 50, 67, and 50% of snaps. 3 of those 4 games, he's not even on the field 60% of the time.
Right.
So it really is concerning are we even going to see enough opportunities for Jayden Reed? And then when he's out there, are they even going to throw him the ball? So, like you said, it's the double-edged sword, because he's not seeing opportunities to get on the field, and then when he's on the field, he's not seeing opportunities with the ball thrown his way. So I just don't know how you could trust him this week with what we've seen from the last couple of weeks with your season on the line.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
not
playing Adam
banking on
Thielen. That's not a question.
I'm not banking on 2 touchdowns. Because
No.
that's at this point, that's what you have to bank on from him is 2 touchdowns. And I'm not gonna sit here and hope for that.
No. And this will be the week where you and I both rip into
Yes.
Jayden Reed, and he
Yes,
now goes
100%.
off for eight receptions for
100%.
124 yards and a score on the afternoon, and he'll be a top 10 wide receiver on the week. So you're welcome. We ripped into Jayden Reed enough here at this point for you to make him a startable piece this week. But I mean, look, based on what he's been giving you, I can't justify a top 30 ranking for the life of me.
I agree.
I can't justify that right now. I don't care who the matchup is. Seattle isn't like intriguing enough for me to be like, you know what? Actually, I am interested in Jayden Reed this week. I'm not there. I can't see it. Talk to me when he plays the Vikings. I'm willing to have another conversation there. But for right now, he can't be a top 30 wide receiver in my rankings. So I think that is a warranted faller that we are seeing this week.
Definitely.
We'll wrap it up there. Make sure you follow us on the socials. We got so much other content coming out for you all as well. Short form content specifically. FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and TikTok. Now, yes, TikTok may be going away mid-January. We're still going to be pumping out content here on this channel for you all, but if you want to show us some extra love as well, we would appreciate it if you follow us on our other socials as well. Or if you're here from TikTok as well, make sure you follow our other shorts channels as well, whether that's on Instagram, on Facebook, or YouTube Shorts as well. We have a separate channel for that. If you want to follow more of our individual content as well, I am at Lucas Wenzel on X, Camlaw FFF for Cameron. Cameron isn't on the cool new Blue Sky app yet, but I am. I post every once in a while over there. Same username over there, Lucas Wenzel. You can find me on there as well. We'll be back tomorrow, as always, for our trademark episode here on this channel. 16 to 24 different players who will change your outcome for round 1 of the fantasy playoffs. Yeah, make sure you subscribe, turn on your notifications so you know as soon as that video is out. We will see you all soon. Deuces.